হয়ে গেছে স্যার।
হয়েছে? Okay. Welcome to all of you. I, on behalf of the Department of English, welcome you for another webinar that we are organizing in collaboration with the IQAC of our college, and the title of our webinar is The Empire and After: Trends, Issues and Perspectives. In view of the COVID situation, these kinds of webinars is the only way to keep active the teaching learning process. Really, we are surprised to receive such overwhelming response from all over the world, and as it is a matter of paper presentation, so we received many abstracts, but due to time constraints, we could accommodate only 27 abstracts. And we will see them. We'll listen their research papers with the webinar. And without taking any more time, I would like to request our respected teacher in charge, ma'am, Dr. Sujata Mukherjee, for the inauguration speech. And after that, the program will go on. Now it's to you. It's to you, ma'am. Please start with your inauguration speech.
Namaskar. In favor of SR Fatehpuria College, I would like to convey very warm greetings to all the attendees and welcome you to this international webinar organized by the Department of English in collaboration with the Internal Quality Assurance Cell of this college. We have participants joining us across India and abroad as well. We are undergoing through a difficult time due to spreading of the coronavirus with a rapid speed resulting global pandemic situation. We are constantly freaked out for this infectious disease which may toll our life anytime. It has caused a havoc damaging in all aspects of our life, and educational system is not an exception. Because of the forced closure of the educational system, e-learning has come out as only source of learning. But keeping all these cares aside, we hope for the best. It's my pleasure to intimate you that the webinar will go on for 2 days, where the selected scholars will present their papers on the topic The Empire and After: Trends, Issues and Perspectives. Keynote of the program will be addressed by Dr. Asantha U. Attanaike from the University of Colombo, Sri Lanka for today. And for tomorrow, we have Professor Chandrabhu Chakraborty and Dr. Shreya Bhattacharjee as our keynote speakers. Apart from them, from each technical sessions, we have experienced and famous professors from all over the world. Dr. Boishali Hui, Dr. Devapriya Paul, Dr. Anushya A. Paul, and Esra Santasu from USA. At the end of each presentation, we will have some questions and our scholars will answer to the questions. We are looking forward for an excellent discussion for the next 2 days. Thank you all.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for your such kind speech. And now, I would like to request our invited keynote speaker who will give the keynote address for today's lecture, for today's session, as well as the inaugural session of our webinar. And before handing the mic to her, I would like to tell about her briefly. And the name of the invited keynote addresser is Asantha U. Attanaike, and she is a senior lecturer attached to the University of Colombo, Sri Lanka. She received her BA from the University of Perambania, MA from University of Kelaniya, and PhD from Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. She was a Fulbright advanced teaching and research scholar at Pennsylvania State University, USA. She is a HKSEC alumna at Harvard University, USA. Her thesis, undergraduate ELT in Sri Lanka, Policy Practice and Colonial Curriculum Practices in South Asia, Building Confidence to Speak English by Routledge Publishers, 2019, UK, is her latest addition to the academia. Her forthcoming book, an action research handbook for English language teaching in South Asia, which she co-authored with her husband, Colonel Adam L. Barbarich. She is an award-winning creative writer, as well as she has published 3 English novel translations into Sinhala. She is compiling her memoir, Living in Sri Lanka with a White Husband. And now it's to you, ma'am. Just you begin the lecture.
Okay. Right. Now I think I want to show the slides PowerPoint presentation. So I am using this present now icon here, and then yeah. Just give me a second. Can you see my PowerPoint?
Yes, ma'am. It's visible.
Is it clear? Is my PowerPoint presentation clear to everyone? Is it visible?
Yes, ma'am. Now it's absolutely visible in full screen. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, right. If you have any issues, kindly let me know. So when Professor Bhaskar, anyways, okay. Very good afternoon to you all, and thank you very much for inviting me. And when Professor Bhaskar asked me what my specific topic is of the talk, I said I would like the same thing that your conference is going to be woven around the empire and after trends, issues, and perspectives, because the moment I saw that title, it captured my heart. So I don't want to have another different one within that, because it captures everything that I've been talking about or I've been working on for the past 10 years or so. So I'll take questions and answers, questions at the end. And if you have any questions, please note them down and then we can discuss later. But I'm talking about trends and issues initially, and under these rough, topics. For instance, the trends in Western cultural and social artifacts, and then language, English and mother tongues, and then attitude standards, and how they are how I have divided them into subheadings for the purpose of discussion here, like representation of the West in our attire, food and festivals, and about imports and the importance that we give to our mother tongues, and before English, and then the kind attitudes and standards, and all that is covered. So in a kind of flow, if you take it to a flow chart, this is how it is. So we, India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Pakistan, we all come under post-colonial societies. And so I am going to talk about post-colonial societies and what we have, and the influence of this empire and after the empire and after, and the issues, trends, issues, and perspectives according to this flow. Like I talk about cultural and social artifacts and how they are affected by the Western influence, and then languages. I'm taking languages separately. You might think that how come language is part of culture, part of social, but and it could be taken as an artifact too. But language, since I am into English language education, I took it separately because it's such a big area to talk about, and you can separate it from, for the sake of discussions, from other cultural and social artifacts, is what I thought anyways. So you can contest that very easily, I know. So I'm talking about languages, English and mother tongues. And then that then from the discussion, then I come to the attitudes, and how, what attitudes we have with regard to languages, with regard to representations of those who speak a particular language or particular languages, and then other representations. And with that I go to standards, like, attitudes form standards. And then how we how we have tried, I don't think we have negotiated anyways, to anyways the standards that leads to white supremacy. So this is how I'm going to discuss, the view our this my discussion in the few slides. And then my presentation structure would be like, I'm going from very general observable practices in the society, and briefly I touch upon the theoretical principles, because otherwise I might not look like a academic. So therefore I thought, okay, let me touch upon some theoretical principles, but they are everywhere in our observable day-to-day practices. There's so much theory behind, but unless until I extract some of them and show, well, I might not look serious. So for the sake of that, so, and the perspectives, and I'm talking about trends, issues, and then perspectives. So I'm going to ask some questions at the end, and those are like, the discussions. Are they all under you, or who creates all these issues and trends? So this slide comes at the end too. So let us look at what we all share, the colonial legacy. You see, so if I may read, if you can read it, please read. It's worth reading it, because we all are with a kind of colonial legacy. Some may have more, some may have less, but we all have it. But more than now, if you read this, more than half of the world was ruled by the British Empire. The legacy the empire left behind made societies more complex and confused with these two terms, inferiority and superiority complexes, and dependent and colonial mentalities. These are the key issues, key points that I am going to talk about through the representation of this Western and Western associated mentalities. The English language I play, take as something major. The English language and the culture associated with it are the unmistakable carriers of this complex legacy, whose various manifestations are still active in former colonies. They are perpetuated by the influence of the modern West, and they continue to form, shape, and reshape attitudes towards those who exhibit links to the West in some way. For instance, if you look at the spoken form of English language, and then that's a very clear manifestation of how Western influence is on us, how much it is on us, and to what extent and in what forms. So that is one example of the colonial legacy, that how important English language and the culture associated with it, and how we treat the whole thing. And now, first thing is cultural and social artifacts. So if you think of this now I know I lived in India for about 4.5 years, so it might not be very relevant to India, but somewhat. Now, if you look at the high value placed on imported goods and products, it's more in Sri Lanka actually than in India. But whatever we have now, for instance, if it is a handbag, and if you say, oh, it's from UK, it's from USA. My sister went to USA, and when she came back, she brought it for me. So you see, it's such a high value thing for us, that it's something really very important, and it's more than what we have in the local markets or locally produced. At the same time, now and this is true to India also. But in Sri Lanka, but unfortunately, you don't know, we hardly produce anything. So everything is imported. It's very sad that even saris, we used to have very good locally made saris, but now Indian saris are more important for us than anything. Oh, we went to India and we bought all that kind of thing. So you see, so import, now what happens is that when we place high value to for Western stuff initially, what happens is that the value on the local products go down, it declines. So as a result, everything that is imported from outside becomes important than local stuff, not necessarily stuff coming from the West. But that has happened to our imports with from China also. Now we don't produce any toys for little ones. It's just all Chinese. Initially, it's Western influence with coming from what is coming from the West. But when we can't afford to it, because we have already stopped producing, then we turn to a market that is cheaper, so China. So as what happens is that as a result of this initial colonial mentality and worshipping what is coming from the West, we stop, our local products are on the decline, or were on the decline, and as a result of that, we tend to import stuff from outside. And still, what is coming from UK, US, the West white countries are placed very high. And then look at the dress code, dress patterns. Now, if you look at what we wear, dress codes and all, you would be surprised. It's like in Sri Lanka, if you come here, I'm sorry, I talk mostly in terms of Sri Lankan context, even though I'm very, very much acquainted with what is in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, all three countries. You see now, even India, if you go to Delhi side, there's this, Vasant Vihar side, Vasant Kunj, Vasant Vihar, Priya Market. It's all very, very westernized. And if you go to Goan side, it's all Western, and dress code patterns. And now Goan is, it's a Goan experience is totally different. But if you go to Delhi, for instance, now, or even in your own areas, I don't think it's that much there in Bengal. I've been to Bengal. I've been to your Durga Puja also in Calcutta. So, but this dress code, dress patterns are very much westernized in certain pockets in India only, but in Sri Lanka it's everywhere. And if you go to Pakistan, I don't think it's that much there at all. Dress code, the dress patterns, and Bangladesh to a certain extent, Dhaka area, you might find people, some, very few. But India and Sri Lanka actually a little more than other two countries in the South Asian post-colonial region. But what we do, even through food choice, now if you wear something, like Western dress, and then go to Pizza Hut, you go to McDonald's, and you see, so you think that you elevate yourself. So that's a kind of a kind of higher position given to a person just because the person wears something Western. Or the moment we get more money here in Sri Lanka, what we go for is like some Western food. Well, let's go have Burger King. It's like very expensive, but you don't go for something local that much, because I think because of this the influence of this colonial period. And then we are talking about the trends and the issues. So trends, these are the trends actually. So what happens now in India also, I know there you get lots of Western food courts and all in capital cities. So why? Like, they have to be there, I know, and there's no problem with that. But the kind of elevation, the kind of elevated status we give, all that, actually, I am trying to problematize in this discussion, and then see what comes out. Like, yeah, we blend in. We have all this, we are a salad bowl. That's true. But how much should we do this, and to what extent, and at the cost of what is ours. So these are the things that we need to discuss. And then this cultural artifacts and all that, the influence of that on influence of the Western culture, Western representations on us actually is captured here. This I'm sure you all are more acquainted with this Gramsci's cultural hegemony, that the spontaneous consent given by the great masses of the population to the general direction imposed on social life by the dominant fundamental group, and this consent is historically caused by the prestige which the dominant group enjoys because of its position and function in the world of production. Now you see, this fits very well, like, the dominant group, that was our colonial masters, and the consent is historically caused by the prestige which the dominant group enjoy, and because of its position and function in the world of production. So this is, and we take it by like spontaneous consent. We don't think about it. It's like given, like by the general mass of the population. So it's and then it's a general direction imposed on social life, and you might, in West Bengal side, I am not very sure how much this is there, but I'm 100% sure that Western stuff is like, if you can get all that, you are very much happy and you are like, oh wow, kind of thing. But in Sri Lanka, it's so much there. It's like Goa. And then the other thing I'm talking about is language, English language basically. And if you read what is here with the shared colonial history, countries like Sri Lanka, India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, we are struggling to develop, and we are perennially in that developing third world category. And we try to develop for over now 70 years, and we are still in that category. And but in our struggle, this to develop, this process, we have placed English language education as very important and an integral part of our education systems, because English is the key for higher education, and it's the key for upward mobility, and most importantly, a gateway to the Western world. So almost everybody in these third world countries crave to go to the West, for some, either for higher education or to kind of migrate. So these are, most of the people who are educated have these dreams, like, to settle down in America, to settle down in Australia, these kind of, and English language is the key factor, and it's very important. So therefore it has, established its power in these countries like anything. And with language, we all know culture comes, culture is part of it, and with English, you can't help it, but we get the cultural element also attached to it. But I must say India is doing very good in that sense, like not like Sri Lanka, that you have somehow preserved that Indianness in English language, and therefore the culture. So it's actually a commendable thing. Over generations this has been happening, but still Indians also have this dream of going to the Western world, getting educated in the West and all. So I am not saying any of these things as negative or anything. I'm just talking about what issues we have, what because of these trends, the issues we have, and the kind of perspectives that we need to have to resolve these issues. And then English and mother tongues, the now when it comes to, we place a high value on the Western culture and all, and we think it's something elevated, and with that then we take language, and then we try to represent ourselves like wearing Western dresses and trying to whenever we get a chance to eat something, a hot dog, this, that, all those things that were not there before, like something Western. And then language and English language, how important English language for us for upward mobility, higher education, and go to the West. But then when it comes to English language and the mother tongues, so what happens when with the comparison? Now you see English has a high utility value, and mother tongues as compared to English do not have that much of a utility value. And then what happens in in trying to talk using English or using mother tongues only. Now if you look at English and mother tongue, now what kind of very high utility value we have? Now actually when you go to a job, the interviews are in English medium most of the time. And then if it is private sector, it's very important that you know your English. And at the same time, for your higher education, without English you cannot go abroad, and you have to pass TOEFL, IELTS, and all that. And your higher education is mostly, even locally, most of the universities even in India has an English medium, so it has a very high utility value as compared to mother tongues. So mother tongues do not have that much of a utility value. Mother tongues are important, and I know now in the next part I am discussing how it affects mother tongue. But when it comes to utility value, you cannot compare the value with actually English and mother tongues, because mother tongue's utility value is actually very, very limited. And then when you think of relations with mother tongues, English and its relations, actually I did a research some time ago, and then I asked the teachers, how do you see English in the context of mother tongues? And then the responses they gave, I could club into three categories. And some thought English is the most powerful language, and it gives prestige. It's without English you can't do anything, and you can get many things done if you know English, and it's associated with power and prestige. And then some of the respondents said it's always in competition with mother tongue. And then it's like sometimes English comes forward, sometimes mother tongues. Now this I can actually sometimes associate with Indian situation also, because you see some now at different places, different functions, English goes down and mother tongues may come first. Now but it's actually not very often, but more than that, I see in our context mother tongues compete with each other, like Hindi, and imposing Hindi is not liked by Bengalis, not liked by Tamils in Tamil Nadu, whereas at the same time in Urdu, in Pakistan, people don't like Sindhi, people don't like Urdu coming and imposing on their language. And then the whole idea of Bangladesh itself is going against Urdu. So competition, yes, there is a competition with English and mother tongue, but in our context I think more of a between mother tongues. But nevertheless, in Sri Lanka also Sinhalese and Tamil, we had 30-year and civil war because of language issues. So yes, there, even though there is a competition between mother tongues, different mother tongues within our context, but there is a competition between English and mother tongues also, depending on the function that we need to perform in different situations. They come forward and play their role. And while some other issues, actually the respondent, this is from the sample was teachers of English. They suggested that mother tongue should completely be replaced by English. and then because there's no utility value of mother tongue at all in education, especially in higher education. So those were the ideas that teachers have with regard to English in the context of mother tongue. But they all placed English as something very, very important. And then what happens is that now as a result of this high utility value that we place on English, what happens to people who are unable to speak English? That's another very interesting area that we need to look at. Now, as a result of those who are unable to speak English properly, what tends to happen is that there's something called, I use the word pickling, and not only people who are unable to speak English, but those who want it to be fashionable kind of thing, they use a lot of pickling. It's easy alternative, and it's both code switching and code mixing. And then I have found some examples here in Sinhala. When you speak Sinhala, this is how it's this is very much there. Husband karya car එක drive karanama. So karya is like wala in Hindi. I'm sorry, I don't know what the Bengali term is. And you get husband karya car එක drive karanama. And wife කාර්යයට cook කරන්න බෑ, sick. Lunch එක take away කරනවා. So this is now new Sinhala. This is new Sinhala. කාර්යය කරනවා. We have the Sanskrit base. So, karna kind of thing comes from Hindi also. So, and then you see, so this kind of stuff is happening in Sri Lanka very much now. And I know it happens everywhere. Even when I watch some Hindi channels also, we have this Hindi dialogue, Hindi channels, and they also use a lot of English words in the middle. And then you might think, what is this? Now, what is this plague happening to the whole South Asia? Like so much pickling. And it's not, ultimately, it's not Sinhala, it's not Hindi, it's not Bengali, it's not Tamil. It's a kind of total pickle, and then most of the time what you hear is English, but now and then you have one or two mother tongue words. And I heard recently that in Tamil Nadu there's this TV program where you give one person to talk in Tamil, and then I forget the time duration for how long that person has to speak in Tamil, but the winner will get 1 million INR. You see, can you believe that? So that itself shows how important it is to speak purely on one's own mother tongue, and how difficult at the same time. So because we tend to switch over to English words very, very much and very easily, and it happens most of the time, and especially in urban areas, this is very much there. And then this leads to, actually, now we talk about cultural artifacts, we talk about language and all, but this is the most important part of my discussion actually. Now, attitudes. What kind of attitudes do we have as a result of this? So, because as a result of attitudes, what kind of placement we have for these cultural artifacts and languages. Now, if you look at this, it's a kind of, you cannot have a very linear process about on this. It's actually very much a cyclical process. Attitudes leads to this, and then like that. So now I'm talking about to tell you the truth, when I organized this when I tried to organize this discussion, I found it very difficult to have a kind of very clear flow, because everything I felt like they are coming again and again, and I am kind of overlapping. All these things are overlapping, and I may be looking at this perspective, but the same thing comes in some other perspective, some other under some other topic or title that I have designed to speak on. So it's not easy for me to organize today this talk. So you might feel it, but I'm not very sure. But anyways, let me try my level best. So we are talking about these attitudes, which are very, very important. And we talk about attitudes. We talk about we talk about attitude towards languages. and and what kind of it's not simply positive and negative attitudes that we are talking about. It's more complex than that. And then we talk about speakers and of languages, and then how are they judged by the various factors, for instance the how factor and the what factor. Now let me talk a little about it. That if you talk about different languages, now I spoke about this teachers perspectives, what they thought about. So this English is very prestigious, and you need it for everything. Without English you can't do anything. So this is not simply a perspective, it represents a kind of attitude also. And then mother tongues are not all that important. Mother tongues, they have a utility value when it comes to preserving your cultural identity, your national identity. Yeah, but then capitalism has taken over. So more important is what uh, the utility value is most. More importance is placed on that, and that's English. So we have different attitude towards languages, especially in English and our mother tongue. And then what about the speakers who speaks better English, kind of, those who speak. I'm talking more about it in a little while, but let me talk a little about. So speakers are judged by the how factor. Now in Sri Lanka you will find those who speak with a western attitude, western accent, are kind of treated as very educated. Oh my god, they are like, they come from a very good background and all that. And you will see some of these you will be surprised to hear what Indians, Pakistanis, Bangladeshis said about it. And but what I'm trying to say here is that briefly, that we place so much importance to how people speak English and not by the what factor. What do they speak using that English? We don't pay that much attention to, because we are deceived by the very smooth flow, the good kind of accent with some American, some British. Even they themselves don't know what kind of accent they are using. But we are carried away. The listeners are carried away by the how factor when we hear people speak English, and not by the what factor, what kind of substance is there. We don't pay much attention to. And then what kind of attitudes do we have towards the West and its representations? So we'll have, all that is actually all that contributes to the kind of people we are today, or the kind of take we have towards our value systems and all. And then because of these attitudes themselves, now you see they result in brain drain. We have a lot. Now Sri Lanka has a major problem with brain drain, because all our educated people are not in Sri Lanka. They have gone to the West, America, then Europe, and then Australia, everywhere they have gone to those countries. And in India also, I know most of my friends in JNU those days, they used to crave to go to the USA. Somehow, but India can afford to do that. You have 1.2 billion population, and only a handful will be able to get there, and still there's a lot remaining to carry the wagon forward, pull the wagon forward. But Sri Lanka is very much deprived in that sense. So all this because we place a high values on the Western, on the English related cultures, English related the well work atmosphere. Various reasons, various things are there. But so and then now look at the attitude towards the West and its representations. What kind of attitudes do we have towards the West and its representations? Now if I remember correct, now in the 80s we had this concept. Now we looked at English language, we used the word kadu means sword concept. So I need to get my kadu polished, my sword polished, things like that. Because now kadu is representation of power. So and you have to get it polished so that you can cut and chop other people. That is the idea. No, this is not simply concept. This is actually a whole representation of attitudes towards language. And that is colonial masters one major representation. And then if you look at the favorable disposition, those who are educated speak English, those who are not educated, uh, those who don't speak English are not educated. We have come down to that level also. And then in Sri Lanka, most people say, those who speak English belong to higher class. And then in Pakistan, in Bangladesh, some parts of India identified people who spoke English as like intelligent also. And not only speaking English, now with this comes how you dress, how what your attire is, how you carry yourself. Like the more you go closer to the Western these ideas, the higher you are considered. And then the speaker, the factor, that the how factor is more important than the what factor when you speak English. Now, I would like to give you some of my the data that I have collected over these years with regard to English language, which is my field. Now, if you look at, from 2007 to 2017-18, I've been collecting data from Sri Lanka. And students, if you look at this, the tallest bar, it's always these students loved of the four skills that they want to learn, that they learn in learning English: listening, speaking, reading, writing. They love to speak the most. That's been the case from 2007 to 17. Now, if you see here, again, you can see they want to speak English the most desired skill, 11, 13, speaking. And then when I ask them why you love to speak English, but why don't you speak? You are in the university, and you are supposed to be the cream of the society. You go through a very competitive exam, so why don't you speak some English? Then they say, I fear that others may laugh at my mistakes. I am scared that. So I'm shy that I won't speak correct English because I don't know which word, which language. I'm not sure which word to use, which grammar, which verb to use. All kinds of stuff is coming out from our students. And then I did a similar study using. Sorry, I traveled in all these countries: Sri Lanka, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and covered whole area. Now, if you see India, I collected data. Pakistan, other than Kashmir, we went everywhere to collect data. Kashmir doesn't have a university, so we didn't go there. In Bangladesh, you see all this: Chittagong, Dhaka, Rajshahi, Khulna, everywhere. Collected data from 4,600 students, and then we asked the same questions. What is the skill you want to improve the most? You can see Sri Lanka, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, they all said their most favorite skill is speaking, and some say speaking plus others. So everybody, those who opted for other skills, wanted to improve their speaking as well. Okay, and then the reasons, I asked them also, why don't you speak English? Now you are in the universities, colleges. So, the fear, shyness, some not responded, some dislike English, but very few you can see neither shy nor fear. So most of our students are scared to speak English for the fear of being laughed at by the society. So the outcome came in this book, Post-Colonial Curriculum Practices in South Asia, Building Confidence to Speak English. So this is one why I brought up this data and everything, is that you see now when we talk about, when we use when we talk about this cultural, colonial masters and the kind of legacy we have got, we have to remember that even in countries, in societies where Western cultural artifacts are not all that manifested through the attire, food, and all, speaking English is something, a clear, very clear manifestation of how much you are close to the Western culture. So that is why I took this English language and spoken part into the discussion, because you see the primacy speaking in English has obtained over other skills may be attributed to the fact that it is the representation of class, education, intellect, and all that. And being able to speak English means presenting oneself easily as educated and belonging to a higher class and a member of the intellectual community without having to prove all that by writing in English. If you spoke English, then you belong to now. In India, students said, if people who spoke English are like, they stand out. They, when they speak good English, they stand out, and they look very independent. They are very stylish. I've collected a lot of data, saying different attributes from different 4 different countries. Now, Pakistan and Bangladesh, they said those who speak good English are intelligent too. And then all kinds of stuff. Speaking English is a very easy way to show that we are close to the higher world than what is ours, what is local. So this is very important, that we need to think that even when we do not represent ourselves through food, as I said, other cultural artifacts, speaking English is a very sure and very clear manifestation of how much akin we are to the Western world. And the definition of, so all this happens, I'm discussing under attitudes. All this happens because of attitudes, or or attitudes make all this happen also. So some language attitude. So what is the definition of language attitude? So I found one, this Fasold. As I said, I touch upon the theoretical part briefly, otherwise I might not look very academic. So therefore, this is one definition that I found. Some language attitude studies are strictly limited to attitudes towards language itself. Most often, however, the definition of language attitudes is broadened to include attitudes towards speakers of a particular language or dialect. And even further broadening of the definition allows all sorts of behavior concerning language to be treated, including attitudes towards language maintenance and language planning efforts. So you see, language attitudes not only make us act some way, in our day-to-day lives. It actually, language attitude influence in terms of how we maintain languages, and our language policy efforts also, language planning. They go into language policy making also. So we have to remember that when you discuss attitudes and then language attitudes, they are actually very, very important. And then this that David Crystal talked about English as a global language, and then how does it become a global language? According to him, language becomes a global language for one chief reason: the political power of its people, especially their military power. So, actually English remain most powerful, even though the power shifted from the England, the UK, England, English masters to US, the language remains the same. So earlier, the military power was with the English masters, colonial masters, and that has been shifted to America, the US, and still the language is the same. So that's how, according to David Crystal, language becomes a global language because of the political power of people who speak that language. So English did not change here. The power shifted. It didn't make a big difference. And we talk about English linguistic imperialism also. Robert Phillipson talks about, how much it promotes the instrument of foreign language policy of major speaking states and all. So this is just another discussion. I'm not reading it out because I think I have about 15 minutes more. And then with these attitudes, the next most important thing is, with these attitudes, the standards are formed. Now we look at how our cultural artifacts change, how much our language is influenced, and then all this happens because of attitudes, and then you see attitudes form standards. So with all these attitudes, actually what is there? The Western standards are formed, and then it contributes to a white supremacy. Now I'll give you some examples. These are, like, as I said, I talk about day-to-day practices. So I found these on actually some, I think, Facebook. So if you look at this manifestation of the English language and its culture as the standard, how we promote it in our local, cultures, local our context. If you look at this, a good book can change your life. Now look at this. After the book, who is coming out? You see a man you're wearing a European kit with a briefcase and all. So since when did Asian countries, South Asian societies, wear tie coats and briefcases? Our culture is not this, but you see how we set standards. You know how a good book can change your life into what? Now look at the without us thinking too much. We post all this, but what happens is we set standards as a result. Now, if you look at this is on the on my one side. The language is my mother tongue, Sinhala. Now, if you see, kids read Mihira newspaper. These are about newspapers, newspaper advertisements, and men read Dinamina, and legends read daily news. You see how we promote, how we set standards. So kids just read Mira, men read Dinamina single papers, legends only read daily news. And then the idea of a gentleman. Now, all these are very much among ourselves in the society. That's why I said you talk about the practice, general practice. And then the idea of gentleman, actually this has to be gentleman. I got this picture from, again, some social media or something. So you see how we create the idea of a gentleman wearing a tie, coat, full kit, and all that. But now we look at the perspectives level. Perspectives. Why do we do all these things? Why do we set this kind of standards? Why do we, in terms of what we speak, in terms of what we eat, in terms of how we speak, in terms of how we dress, all that? Why? What kind of perspectives can we derive from that? So at a surface level, how I see this is that this is a desperate attempt to be on par with the people who speak English. So those who want to kind of dress according to the Western way, or to be seen in a Western associated context. I remember one of my friends did the work on barista culture, and what she said was people like to be seen in baristas, so that they can elevate their social status, kind of. So a desperate attempt to be on par with the people who speak English, or belonging to that culture, or to show off a class that is otherwise not present. Or it could even be a cover up of not being able to speak English in a coherent manner to make some sense. But sometimes people, if they are unable to speak proper English, might try to cover it up by wearing something Western, or eating at a place that is known as Western food serving place, kind of. And at the same time, there's a fashionable value also. There's a fashion. Now if you dress in a Western way, it's fashionable. So that is also there. And if you use pickling language with Hindi or Bengali using English in the middle, it's fashionable also. But perspectives at a deeper level, how I see is that this is what is important actually. The appealing nature of consumerism is there. So however much we talk about all this, there's consumerism is associated with the Western norms, Western cultures, and it's very appealing. It's very appealing, and at the same time, desire to go close to the developed other. We have to remember we have been in the third world over 70 years, all 4 countries, and that developed other is always for us like a dream. So we have a desire to go close to the developed other. So that is also another reason why we have all these practices in our daily lives, like the in terms of food, in terms of dresses, in terms of what we value, in terms of the way we speak, how we speak, all that. And then the other thing is attractive individualism, as opposed to communalism. Now, in our Asian society, South Asian society especially, we have this so much of communalism, like family. It's very important for us, like togetherness, all that. But in the West, it's individualism mostly. But it's attractive because you are free. You are an individual. All that. It's like not you are not bonded by family values and all that much. So that is also attractive to our people, because we are like, before we do something we have to think whether this would hurt my family. But in the West it's not like that. It's in I am more important. It's not that they don't think of others. It's wrong if we think that they don't care about the family. No, it's wrong. But it's individualism is number one, I and me, and then you think of others. So and then everybody treats, okay, yeah, we are family, but his rights, his individual needs are more important. That's what the family would also look at a problem, if a family member faced with no individualism. It's both ways. And then individual rights based versus communal duty bound native cultures. So all our cultures are very communal duty bound, our native cultures, whereas in the West it's individual rights based. What are my rights, what are your rights? I respect your rights, so respect my rights. Whereas we don't think of rights at all. It's our duty, responsibility, family duties, responsibility. So these are actually, they're very, very different. We should not misunderstand that the West does not take care of the family rights, family bonds. No, they do take care of, but there's a thin line between that thin but sharp, that and a definite line, that yeah, individual rights are more important than family obligations. It happens there, whereas ours is always, we sacrifice a lot thinking of the family. And then freedom as opposed to family bonds, again accountability, responsibility. So with that individualism, individual rights preserving or keeping at the highest, there's something called freedom. Actually, freedom is so much that you are free to do whatever you like, and family expects you to be free also. It's not that family says, oh please don't do it, we will be hurt. Like, no, if you think it's right, do it. You are free to do that kind of culture. So this is also very appealing to our people. And at the same time, very fast spread of and easy access to pop culture now, thanks to social media, thanks to internet, and thanks to TV programs, everything. Now there's easy access to popular culture, Western culture, and it's spreading very fast, and it's very appealing because it's as opposed to the Asian cultures, Asian, for instance, arts also, music and all. How much pop music have crept into our musical domains. And then at the same time, while this Western cultural artifacts and all these creep into our societies, we have very weak local counter forces. We don't have that much strength to fight against this, because this is coming with such a appealing baggage. So we have very weak local counter forces. At the same time, sadly, countries like Sri Lanka does not have or do not have visionaries. We have serious dearth of visionaries and role models. India, to a certain extent, is blessed with role models, and India is to a certain extent blessed with visionaries. But we do not. We are not. Sri Lanka, no. And then I don't know how much it is with Pakistan, Bangladesh. They are also very questionable. Because they have their own problems and dealing with different issues at different times. And poverty being one, illiteracy is one. But India, with all that going ahead, like a very, very definite forward journey, and India has always been blessed with visionaries and role models. And then there's another reason, perspectives, why this Western culture, Western artifacts, they are so appealing. The reason being that other side of the fence is always greener. So that is also there. That's very human to see it as that. So what happens, consequence is that the inferiority complex created with the inability to speak English. Sometimes our people are unable to speak English, as I said. So as a result, you pickle language. So there's a kind of inferiority complex, and that manifests itself in a false superiority complex. That can happen, that if you know a little bit of English, you will try to show off on the others. So if you don't know how to speak English, you wear some money and then you try to buy new clothes that are like Western, closely Western, or eat kind of food that, and then you try to show a superiority complex which is fake actually. And then at the same time, the consequences, English language and its culture set standards as aspired status in local culture. So our next generations aspire to be something related to something akin to Western cultures, English and its related cultures, and because we have set standard and then the standards, and they are the aspired status in local cultures. And as a result of this pickling languages, mother tongues and value systems in cultures get very distorted. So on the one hand, mother tongues are like pickled, husband karya, wife karya. The moment you say husband wala, wife wala, what happens to the value system? So, and that also declines, like get distorted and definitely decline, because you do not have the respect that is attached to the word there anymore. When the moment you say husband karya, husband wala, wife wala, kind of thing, you see. So, and also mother tongues lose their utilitarian value as opposed to English. So that is happening, and in higher education you must have English. All that is there. And therefore, we cannot say that the English language and the culture it represents. We can. I don't think we can say ever that we create rich identities. Actually, what happens is that English culture and the Western culture and English language, definite carrier of it, actually makes us more confused nations, and then establishing English language and its culture, further establishing their power. But we remain very, very confused by the day. The local cultures and Sri Lanka especially, and it's extremely confused. We don't know what is ours, what is, others anymore. So this is our situation right now because of this Western, I quote one Professor Patnaik in Odisha. He said, Westoxication, this English cultural Westoxication leaves us as confused nations. Now, the most important thing is who is responsible? Who is responsible? And who creates these trends and issues? Is it the empire that is gone or the superpower that emerged? These are the two questions that I have for us to think ahead, think about. Like, who does all this? Is it the who creates these trends and issues and all these standards and all these attitudes and all? Who creates all that? Is it the English people, our colonial masters anymore, or the superpower, the America? Is it the US that's doing that? Who is doing that? Who is responsible? The answer is, my friends, is us. The brown-skinned South Asian people are, our people are the sole responsible, people, or sole, we have to take the sole responsibility of distorting our cultures, distorting our languages, and having different Western standards, and creating all these, attitudes. All that is done by us, ourselves, and not the colonial masters, not the superpower, the America. So we have to understand that I do not like to blame our colonial masters. I do not like to blame the US. Anybody who has that much power, suppose we would all do the same, very same with power. But if we know where we stand, and if we value our own cultures, our own value systems, we need to know where we should stand. We need to know how much we have to take in, how much we should not take in, and how we need to guide our future generations to have a culture, have a society that is very much, I wouldn't say pure, but something that has as our own some essence that says that, okay, this is pure Sri Lankan, this is pure Indian, this is pure Bangladeshi, this is pure Pakistani. I don't know how much this pure word is relevant here, but we should not be following blindly of the Western standards and all. And the other thing is that we have to now we place all these values, all these standards on the Western culture, and it is not undue. That's another thing we need to remember. And they suit all that because they are, if you say they are punctuality, they are very punctual. If they say they would do something, they do something. And if they say we can't do that, they won't do it. So it's that's another thing, you see. So, and stop without blaming them for invading us. It's high time that to get what is good from them, and develop our own culture in our own way. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Thank you for such engaging lecture. And after that, as a part of this webinar, it's time to unravel the abstract proceedings. But as it is a virtual platform, we have already sent the abstracts to all our registered participants by mail. And now we move to the paper presentation. The first technical session will be chaired by Ashanta U. Atanaike, ma'am. And now it's time to hand the microphone to our first paper presenter. She is Athira BK. She is a research scholar at the Center for Study of Social Systems, JNU, New Delhi. And the title of her paper is Colonial Accounts on Costumes in India, Distinctions and Binaries. And now, just
Hello.
Hello, ma'am.
Hello. What happened? My internet is fine. Hello. Hello.
Ma'am, could you please wait? It seems like the internet connection has a glitch.
Sorry.
Ma'am, it seems like the internet connection over there has a glitch. If you could wait.
No, my connection is fine. I just checked.
No, ma'am, not yours. I think Bhaskar sir's connection. Yeah, he has rejoined.
Okay.
Yes. Perhaps there was a problem with my network. So I was saying that thank you, ma'am, for such engaging lecture. And now I request our first presenter of the day, Aritha BK, to present her paper. And she is a research scholar in JNU, New Delhi.
Oh.
And now you begin the paper.
Ma'am, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
So, as sir has mentioned, my training is not from English language and literature. I'm from C++ JNU. So, my paper is also kind of anthropological in nature, and thanks for allowing me to present. When we talk about colonial accounts on people and culture, they are now attended within discourses of colonial rule, knowledge production, and its politics. How such accounts have helped in the making of an Orient distinct from an Occident is well documented in several post-colonial studies. The question that this article deals with is it possible to take such a one-dimensional view of such descriptions of the colonized by the colonizer. Here, two accounts on clothing in India produced during the colonial period by two authors are discussed. To a textual analysis of the costume of Hindustan, published in 1807, and the textile manufacturers and the costumes of people of India, published in 1866. These debates on colonial knowledge production and its politics is revisited in this paper. So, Edward said in his work Orientalism discusses how through the process of an exotic storytelling, an Orient was made which is fit for displaying in museums and for study for academia, particularly from the end of the 18th century. Along with an absence of lived reality marked by diversities, such narratives have reified the binary of East and West by posing the East as exotic, static, irrational, remote, barbaric, primitive, and emotional. This, according to him, was accomplished through the use of certain props, images, representation of art, visual media, film, and travel writing. Traditional historiography forces us to be something that is less attentive to diversities, to strengthen some strands that would be in a way vindicating imperial tendencies of dominating the other, which is the Orient. But then there are arguments that we say it's possible for having a totalizing and essentializing view of this. Like authors like Breckenridge and Roshan and others have posed a critique of Said for having a single discourse undifferentiated in space and time across social, political, and intellectual identities. Um, so in this paper, I'll be looking at both these things, like whether we can generalize all works produced during colonial time by the colonizer as essentializing of the Orient. So according to Godson, cosmologies are not just abstract intellectual entities, but have practical consequences through informing people's actions and helping them to make sense of changing circumstances. One means of making sense of the world is through ordering collections of objects seen to be representative of various aspects and sets of relationships within the world. And a constant thread through colonial relationship is the attempt to make sense of those relationships through collection of objects, especially through museums and all. The indexical value attached to certain monuments, artifacts, clothes, or jewelry becomes significant when it comes to the making of certain imaginations and narratives about a state's population, be it a colonial or a nationalist one, argues Thapti Guha Thakurta. A museumization and monumentalization of these clothes, clothing styles, artifacts, and jewelry is essential to understanding the colonial by attending to such taxonomic and social and have to understand the domains of colonial interventions and make colonial narratives through photography, look at those the past. So I have tried to look at those texts which found references in those literature came after the colonial period. Another of the element means. So second text, there was like clothing myths, dress and activity in India by Emma Charlo, portrait of the Hindus by in this work, I did find how the culture raised by based on the portrait of the colonized the colonizer gets validation in account on clothing provided by folk of people of India and also paintings done by other such soldiers, which are mostly available in the work titled Costumes of Indo, published in the year 1807 by Edward Smith. So coming to the text, the costume of Hindustan, photographs and drawings can serve as a good source to make sense of colonial efforts aimed at describing the other, to map their origin, nature, and uniqueness. Besides, an ease in establishing anthropology's relationship with this technique and recording the ethnographic reality, these drawings and merchants, missionaries who had taken up the task of documenting the others and their appearance. Till the second half of the 19th century, before the spread of photography and anthropology and of the others, ethnographic drawing was a method adopted by many Europeans for that endeavor. Later, there was an incorporation of natives' drawings, so that it is the natives who are represented. They are representing
Your voice is breaking, Atira. I'm sorry. Atira's voice is breaking. She left me. I think there's a problem with the connection.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Perhaps she has some problem with her network, and
Yeah.
she will be joining soon.
Yes, Atira, you are back.
May I continue?
Yes, please. Yes.
So yeah. So the this work consists of 60 etchings, which are pirated from those works, um pirated from those paintings by Balthasar Solvins. His work, a collection of 250 colored etchings descriptive of the manners, customs, and dresses of the Hindus, was a collection of 250 engravings on the Hindus of Calcutta, which was published in the year 1796. The addition that Edward Orme has made to this is that of descriptions in French and English. Before coming into the aspect of style Solvin has used and how social got translated into these engravings and the time which its belonged to, I'll try to look at the ways through which Orme's selection and portrayal from Solvin's engravings of Hindus of Calcutta got circulated as a widely known text on costumes and clothing in India, with less contestations on its authenticity. So, like when we try we Google or when we try to search for texts on clothing produced during colonial period, this will be one of the texts which we'll encounter with. So, coming to the first point regarding this text, it's about visibility and domination. So, Schwadner argues that museums do not contain a different visible, but the same visible, quantitatively and qualitatively stronger, so much so that we see the common visible that is outside the painting in some way on the model of the visible of the painting, because the visible of the painting is more visible than the common visible. So when we look at the above mentioned aspect of visibility and how it gets translated in the politics of representation, the narrative structure becomes important along with the author's viewpoint. Thus, a museumization of colonial bodies can be understood as something inherently embedded with certain power plays that can have consequences with reference to the kinds of memory and consciousness which are being engendered on these objects. The pan-Indian narrative given to these selected paintings and descriptions on Bengal could be noticed to this statement that the original drawings for the work have been made in Bengal, The different figures which they represent are distinguished by the appellations peculiar to that province, though the descriptions themselves will be found appropriate to every other part of India. So a generalization is made there. The making of a homogeneous population and applications of narratives can pitch into a single India or an Orient, which can be posed against the Occident, refined binaries for colonial domination as an Occident and an Orient. Thus, as Bernard Cohen argues, the investigative modalities do coincide with the governing sense of relevance. And coming to the categories invoked in this description, rather than using an enveloping term of Hindus or Mohammedans, or may here, based on professions, describe only upper caste Hindus as Hindus. Thus, the 60 plates available in the text are titled as Chubdar, Tabuddar, Kersh Burdar, or House Purveyor, a woman of inferior rank, etc. These plates are accompanied with descriptions in English and French. Hargrave, in his commentary on Solvin's work, has mentioned about the errors in Orme's depiction, which Solvin himself has pointed out. So there is a contradiction between themselves. Despite all that, this work is something which can still find in museums, which we can still find in museums inside and outside India as a source for costumes in India. Rather than explicit comparisons or vindication for colonial rule, Orme has tried to make comparisons around globe based on professions and class. To quote his description, descriptions about a fish woman or a pole, the physiognomist and observer of nature will, however, doubtless be amused by forming a comparison between the pole of Hindustan, the Fischerfrau of Hamburg, and Poissard of Paris, and Billingsgate of London. They are all distinguished by the same masculine form, the same vulgarity of manners, and the same grossness of conduct, tempered, however, by the different shades which arise from local and political circumstances. Though he mentions about the local and political circumstances, references of caste, hierarchies, or colonial interferences do not find any mention here. What becomes important here would be that along with taking colonial knowledge production as something where dispositions and affirmations of the colonial can be found, it is not limited to a trajectory of subordination of the Orient only, because he is not talking about this particular woman only. The portrayal of the Orient do not remain as single and homogeneous in all accounts. The drawings and when we comes about the drawings and paintings here, Solvin's training in etchings and those etchings he has done on Calcutta has some differences. According to Hargrave, he has used a primitive style of engraving using a series of horizontal planes, though he is trained in neoclassicism. If this is read with his declaration on providing an exactness in portraying, this can be some cue. This can give us some cue on the styles of drawing and conception of the subject's portrait, like which are primitive, according to them. Along with an aesthetic aspect, the ethnographic aspect inherent to this work is visible when we look at the focus he has given to the background articles along with the portrayal of a person. The clothes are mostly white in color with some exceptions. His marginality in colonial circles, I'm talking about Solvins, his marginality in colonial circles and him being the only non-British painter to portray the ordinary men of Calcutta can give some cue to visit his paintings as something delineated maybe in the slightest ways from a vindication of British rule in India. And coming to the next text, the textile manufacturers and the costumes of people of India, published in 1866. This is a report submitted to the Secretary of State.
Atida, you have 3 minutes. Okay,
ma'am.
Right. 2 more papers to be read out. That's why. Okay, right.
He talks about how this work talks about how a set of 18, there is a set of 18 volumes of collection with a total 700 specimens there, and a distribution of 20 sets with illustrations and descriptions ensuring maximum exactness were made, which were to be circulated in Britain and India. Thus, aiding thus existing museums was one of the main intentions behind a production of such a work. And when we talk about the aesthetic preference here, he talks about how Indian costumes are not as gaudy and glaring, and there is a fineness intrinsic to Indian specimens. But at the same time, he talks about how there is a kind of the fashion is kind of fixed in India, which is less mobile to as in the case of West. So here also we can see how a West is posed against generalized East. He talks about a fixity of fashion in Indian, in the case of Indian costumes, which we can find in several other places. So I would conclude that what we can infer from the two texts is that there are certain limitations in any analysis, which concludes textual contents in either in terms of colonized hierarchy or an Orient Occident binaries. When we look at Orme's work, he has used Solvin's engravings to explain the costumes of Bengal during the time, along with explanations on the food and religious beliefs. Despite an attempt to explain Hindus in terms of Manu's code by adhering to what Said would call as making of the Orient as static, colonial literature or representation sometimes cannot be considered as something homogeneous. It can be heterogeneous, as we discussed in the kind of paintings. They also contradict and contest in terms of author's perspective, as in case of how Solvin's project was to be found free from companies' interferences. So we can't say like all works produced during the colonial period was in a way to reify colonial administration in India. Um, in the case of Watson's work, the project of giving an account on clothing to foster the import of clothes to India as explicit. So we can find that kind of works also, where we can see Said's thesis becoming valid, especially when we look at the arguments of fixity of fashion or procuring mutual benefit through trade, where they are giving kind of some kind of justification for colonial rule in India. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Right. Who is next?
You can, if you have any question on, then you can ask her.
Do we have time? Are we taking questions at the end?
No, actually, after her lecture, she may leave the meeting. So
Okay.
at the end of the paper reading, I think you should ask her some questions.
Okay. So it's the floor is open to the audience. If you have any questions, the audience.
No, ma'am. Actually, there is no question from the audience. If you have any, then you can ask.
Okay, I was interested in this not so binary kind of stuff because I also am of the opinion that you cannot discuss things. Initial categorization could be binary, but it's more complex than binary. But binaries do pave way for a clear discussion, but that's not sufficient. And then the other thing is that you are going very deep into the discussion of this what I compared to what I was talking about. What I was talking about is what is manifested today, but you are tracing the history and then seeing how these complex manifestations of different influences are have come into being. Well, I don't have any questions, but I must say the I was listening very keenly and in the middle because of this disruption of the internet. Something happened and then yeah. But I will read your paper, Atira, and you said you are in JNU. Which year?
So I am I'll be submitting my MPhil thesis in by September or October.
Okay, right. Okay. Congratulations. Now that I listen to you and then, yeah, if I have any questions or any, kind of need for details, then I'll get back to you via Professor Bhaskar. Thank you very much.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, Athira. Thank you. And we cannot do anything to control the web connection, so
Yeah.
it's okay. And now we move to our next speaker.
And one more thing, Professor Bhaskar, if they have any questions, I don't think I gave enough time for them to ask questions. But if any of this audience, academics in the audience have any questions, please forward them to me. Then I'll try to answer them as much as possible.
Sure, ma'am. Then we move to our next speaker, that is Dr. Henrietta Huda. She is an assistant professor in the Department of English in DHSK College, Dibrugarh, Assam. And she has done her PhD on Jacobean drama and its representation of women from materialistic feminist perspective. And the title of her today's paper is Representation of Women and Slaves in Jokra Altarthi's Celestial Bodies, a Feminist Perspective. Now, Huda ma'am, it's to you.
A very good afternoon to everyone. I'm Henrietta Huda from DHSK College, Dibrugarh, that is in Assam. And the title of my paper is Representation of Women in Chokha Bodies, a Feminist Perspective. Chokha Alati, she's a Omanian woman writer, and she, for this particular novel of hers, The Celestial Bodies, she has won the Man Booker International Prize in the year 2019. This novel, it was first published as Sadiyat Al-Qamar, Ladies of the Moon, and it was translated into English by Marilyn Booth in the year 2018. The novel is set in a village, Al-Awafi, in Oman, and it stresses upon the life of three sisters in an Omani family. At the same time, the novel also brings into light the dilemma which is faced by the Oman populace in the wake of post-colonial values, which tend to have a diverse effect in their lives. Now, stuck to their traditional norms, this Omani family finds it very difficult to embrace the changing social conditions of their country or of the society. And the three sisters, they represent, the three sisters, Maya, Asma, and Khawla, they represent the different roles women are bound to take up in a patriarchal dominated society. The paper it shall examine the different aspects of love, pain, frustrations associated in the lives of the three sisters. And along with the older generations of women represented by Salima and Jarifa. Al-Haqqa Celestial Bodies, set in the village of Al-Awafi in Oman, is a fascinating novel which takes the reader to a world of one of the Arab countries where one can see the different facets of life. Revolving around the lives of an Omani family, the novel introduces the readers to two very important aspects: the role of women in a traditional patriarchal society and the hardcore reality of the lives of the slaves. Like many of the countries, Oman too has a history of colonialism, and the novel discusses the younger generation under the influence of colonialism and imbuing its values and culture. The views and opinions of the younger generation of women might be entirely different from those of the older generation, but what tied them together is the suffering and the pains of their lives. Alati very beautifully draws a thin line of demarcation between the values cherished by the younger generation and those by the older ones, and at the same time shows a kind of similarity in their lives. At the heart of the novel is the story of the three sisters of an Omani family. These three sisters, although born and brought up in the same environment, they have their different attitudes to life, and each of them view life from a different angle. The opening chapter of the novel, it introduces us to the elder sister, Maya. Maya is presented as a very simple, very calm and quiet girl who is engrossed in her own world of sewing. She seems to know nothing except sewing. This is what is perceived by her family. But Maya too, as an individual, she too has her hidden desires. And that is her one-sided love for Ali bin Khalaf. But it's a one-sided love, and she had never expressed her feelings to anyone except, secretly, very secretly to God, to whom she prayed silently to just grant her a glimpse of her lover. Salima, the mother of the three sisters, she was always worried about Maya, and she hoped to find a partner for her who would respect Maya's talent as a seamstress. The son of Merchant Suleiman, his name is Abdullah, he asked for her hand, and this was a turning point in Maya's life. She had no option but to get mentally prepared for the marriage. And in one instance, she told her younger sister, Khawla, how a wife is instructed to devote her entire life for the sake of happiness of her husband. I quote from the text, and I should laugh whenever he laughs. And if there are any tears rolling down his cheeks, there had better be some tears rolling down mine. I must be content with whatever makes him happy. This is what is expected of every woman, to lead a life not on her own terms, but following that of her husband. And such lessons, these are given to girls from a very, right from the childhood, that they have to give priority to the happiness, to the joys, and to everything that belongs to the husband and to the husband's family. So Maya, she had to marry Abdullah, and within a few months she became pregnant. So unlike her mother, but here we find a different Maya, okay, who is though very simple, very quiet, but there's something, okay, that makes her a different woman. So unlike her mother and the older generation of women who would prefer giving birth at home, Maya repeatedly told her husband to take her to Muscat, to Sada Hospital for delivery. Her husband remarked, I quote, "You did have my child slide out right into the hands of the Christians," unquote. But Maya, she didn't answer. She didn't answer to her husband, and indeed, she had her baby in, I quote, what the missionaries called the Felicity Hospital, the Sada, unquote. Not only Maya got a child delivered in a missionary hospital, she even named her baby girl London, a very strange name, a name that is of a place. And this shows the colonial influence on Maya. Okay, she had been told by everyone, her elders, her husband, that this is a very peculiar name. Why do you want to give your girl this name? But she didn't listen. She preferred calling her girl London. And so her relationship at the same time with her husband always seemed to be very formal. And she always seemed to be occupied with her children and living little space for her in her life for her husband. And she found a certain kind of solace in sleep, and she indeed enjoyed sleeping. Alauti narrates, I quote, "Sleep was the only paradise. It was the ultimate weapon against the pounding anxiety of her existence," unquote. It was a kind of retreat for her from the worries and anxieties that filled her life. In sleep, she seemed to enter into a place, I quote, "of no responsibilities, where she felt nothing, and the things she had anxiously needed to hold on to while awake fell away," unquote. So this is a kind of retreat for her. All the time being busy with the children, with the screaming, the shouting, the quarreling of the children. And this is what life turns out basically for maybe almost every woman. And everyone needs a space for herself. And this is how Alarti talks about Maya. How did she try to find solace in sleep? Okay, and she always used to be very quiet and didn't have much conversation with anyone. Lived in her own world. Now the second sister, she's Asma. So Asma seemed to be quite smart, unlike Maya. She's educated and always read books to enhance her knowledge. And when she was forbidden by her mother to go near her sister Maya after her delivery, Asma was annoyed because her knowledge of the hadith told her that, I quote, God's messenger had said or shown somehow in his own life, in what he told others, that a woman could eat and drink in company no matter what her condition, unquote. So this is something which the older generation of women, they never maybe knew, or they never had any idea to. But this sister Asma, when she reads books, she keeps on reading books, and she comes to know about the real fact that has been stated maybe in the Quran or in the Hadith, and she tries to memorize those and wants to make the other women of the society aware of it, that you are following a false norm, you are following something that is not fit for the society, but then we need to follow these, we need to read, we need to understand the true meaning of the words that has been spoken by the messenger of God. She rejects the views held by her mother and the other elderly women, but she cannot say anything at the fear being charged of criticizing the faith. The new generation of women like Asma, who are educated and have gathered immense knowledge, on both secular and religious texts looks at the world from an altogether different perspective. They have no doubt adapted to the new changing post-colonial setup, but have their roots firm in their culture. So that exposure to maybe to the world outside Oman has given them insight into a real insight rather into their own culture, into their own tradition. With education, they are able to rationalize the existing culture and tradition and want to present a true picture to the world. Asma recalls how she and other girls of her age were not allowed to go to school. Girls older than 10 years were only admitted to the basic adult literature classes, and I quote, those didn't even begin to happen until sometime later, unquote. But unfortunately, she couldn't complete her education since the school was closed down due to lack of students. But Asma had not given up a desire to learn. In one of her favorite books, this is the name of the book, The Well-Supported Prophetic Tradition, compiled by Imam al-Rabi bin Habib, Asma read about her days where the messenger of God was praying and he asked his wife Aisha to hand him his robe. Aisha replied that she was having her periods. To this, the messenger of God said that it wasn't her fault and it doesn't matter. Asma tried to memorize this hadith so that she could tell her mother and Maya every word of it. Then, but the thing is that she wants everyone to know the exact meaning of the words that the messenger of God has spoken to his people at that time, and she wants to disseminate those knowledge to other people. So, and she is a voracious reader, and some of the books in her shelves include Fruit for the Wayfarer, which is ordinary paper-bound cover, the Mustaraf bound in red velvet and printed at the Mahmoudiya Press, which is in Cairo, the collection of poetry by famous ancient Arab poets, so on. Reading these and many such books have given Asma a chance to gather more knowledge and disseminate it among others. The third sister, that is Khawal, is unlike Asma and Maya. She listened only to her heart and did whatever she wanted to do. When her and her Asma's marriage, it was fixed with Khalid and Ali, the two sons of emigrant Isa, settled in the town. Khawla outwardly rejected the offer. She was in love with her cousin Nasir, who lived in Canada and for years had not visited Al-Awafi. Khawla recalled Nasir's promise to marry her, and in spite of no communication between them for so many years, she still believed and hoped that one day he will come back to her. She told her father that if they forced her to marry anyone else other than Nasir, she would slit her throat. Thus, Khawla refused to submit to the orders of her parents to marry someone of their choice. She rejected the stereotypical role of the daughters who would sacrifice their love for the sake of their parents. Asma agreed to marry Khalid and was happy that she would live in Muscat and pursue her studies. But life had something else stored for her. Though in the initial stage of her marriage, she was overwhelmed with the love Khalid showered on her, but gradually with the passage of time, she, I quote, learned how to accommodate to the situation, unquote. Khalid, who was an artist, a painter, was most of the time engrossed in his own world of painting. Indifferent to what Asma felt, she always thought that he had given his wife enough space to be, I quote, independent and whole, a sphere unto itself, unquote. Asma, I quote, did love him too, this skeptical, careful, slightly distant love. But she began taking precautions. She formed her own celestial orbit. At the age of at the age of 45, she was the mother of 14 kids, and it, I quote, confirmed to her that this was what her life meant, unquote. On the other hand, the novel shows her destiny had changed the life of Khawla. The scene is completely right.
Dr. Enrita, you have 3 more minutes. Sorry to interrupt you. You have 3 more minutes. Yes.
It's okay, ma'am. Okay, I would just like to brief us on Khawla. So Khawla, she was married to Nasir. But the thing is that Nasir, while he was in Canada, he had his girlfriend. He was in a live-in relationship with his girlfriend. But during Canada, he lost his job, he lost his money, and he was dependent on his mother's money. And his mother, okay, before dying, she had a will that he had to marry Khawla, and then only he can inherit her money. So he came to Al-Awafi, got married with Khawla, but the thing is that he never stayed with her. He would be away to Canada, and then he would return every 2 years and just stay with her for some time and get her pregnant and go away. Now, this woman, whether it is after, but later on he regretted, he was thrown out of the house by his girlfriend, he returned to his wife. And after 10 years, having a very well settled life, Khawla decided to get divorced from her husband. And people thought that she is insane. Everything is so calm and quiet in her life now. Why did she took such a decision? But then she did indeed take a decision because she couldn't forget the disloyalty that her husband had towards her, and then the suffering she had gone through, the frustration that she had gone through. So she couldn't forget that. And at the same time, we get a picture of London, this girl who grew up and she got married with one of her with her lover, and then but the thing is that her husband never loved her in the way that he should, and he often beat her and tortured her, and she too decided to later on get divorced from this one, her husband. So women like Khawla, London, so they were the women who were very bold and assertive. Although it seems to be so painful for them to leave away from the husband whom they have loved so much, but yet they could feel that there is something, a self-respect to their self-respect which they should preserve, and this is what had made them take such a decision. And then there were the other women characters, as I have talked about, Jennifer, who is a slave. And she had also passed a very painful life as a slave in the house of her master. And her mother, Salima, she also had a very, a very painful childhood. And these women, they tried to adjust to every situation of the life, to that of their husband, and but at the same time they also felt that there is something that they need to preserve in themselves, and that is their self-respect. No matter how hard men tries to dominate women, the inner self has always given the courage to fight back injustices and to refuse to abide by the stereotypical norms which is set by the patriarchal society. So this is what the novel basically portrays, and Alati, she has accidentally portrayed the feelings, the desires, and the pains and sufferings of the woman in her novel, Celestial Bodies. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Now it's open to all. If anyone has any question, then she or he can ask that. And before that, ma'am, you can begin. If you have any question, then you please ask her.
You know, I haven't read the novel. I was expecting that you would talk about women who are very subjugated and all that. But this, you know, when I listened to you, I realized, oh wow. Okay, and then you
Yes,
made
it's a
me,
very interesting novel.
yeah, you made me, you know, kind of inspired to read the novel. Yeah, and especially with
Yes.
this London, you know, the name and all. That's very very bold. Yes. Okay, thank you.
Yes,
Yes.
ma'am. And thank you,
Yeah.
ma'am.
You want to
Yes,
say?
and it's not, the novel is very interesting, and the way she has portrayed the life of the different women in a novel is very. Although there's another, I couldn't read out the whole, but Ankar Bhuta, this is the mother of Salima, the grandmother of the three sisters, and she was a slave, although she's a slave, but she's very bold. She was forced into a marriage with one of the slaves of her master, but she refused to sleep with her husband, and she was tortured very badly for that. But she didn't give up. She didn't give up. She left her husband, and so these women, they are very bold and very assertive. And this is what the author has presented in her novel. And it also gives us a glimpse into the slave trade that existed in Oman, and later that was banned in the year 1970. I also intended to include this, but the paper got too lengthy. I so thought of writing on this particular topic later on.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Right. We can't hear you. Professor Bhaskar, you are mute.
Sorry. My microphone was muted. Okay. Next, we move to our next paper presenter. She is Pratibha Agarwal. She is a research scholar in the Department of English, North Bengal University, and the title of her paper is Eco-Criticism and the Natives: A Study of Survival. And now, Pratibha Agarwal, it's to you.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear
Yes,
you.
yes, you are. Yes,
Alright.
you are perfectly audible.
Thank you for having me on board. I am going to present a paper on eco-criticism and the natives, a study of survival. So basically what am I going to talk about are the Native Americans who have been subjugated for time immemorial, and how it has left them scarred, and how economically, politically, and socially it has robbed them of a very robbed them of a life which could have given them dignity. So here I shall begin the paper. American Indian, Native American, and Indigenous American are terms used to describe the people who inherit by descent from the first inhabitants claim on territory now known as the United States of America. They have been both subjugated and exiled from lands that were sacred to them, numerous landscapes where every mountain and lake held meaning for their identity and their faith. The dominant culture has intervened. Now, when we're talking about dominant culture, we obviously are talking about the Euro-Americans, or the Europeans who had come in as the colonizers, have intervened consequentially in the literature and culture. Today, the Indians are indisputably an oppressed minority in the United States. The result, as sociologist Menno Bolt puts it, is a cultural crisis manifested by a breakdown of social order in Indian communities. The problem is significantly attributable to cultural degeneration, a process which is created and compounded by the impact of genocide, colonialism, forced cultural and institutional assimilation, economic dependence, racism, and dominance over the lands. When asked by an anthropologist what the Indians called America before the white man came in, an Indian simply said, ours, mine. The identity of the indigenous people is inextricably linked and related to the place they emerge from. Such an organic relationship demands an approach that privileges nature or an organic culture. So I am going to examine this book by Linda Hogan called Solar Storms from an eco-critical perspective, because I would like to examine the relationship between people and the land, and how gradually these people have been marginalized from their own land, and now they are a minority who are seeking to reassert their rights. Now, I will be engaging in Linda Hogan's Solar Storm, which was written in 1995 from an eco-critical perspective. And what am I going to do is explicate the plight of marginalized and sacred places and people, their strategies to heal themselves, as we know how the natives have their own strategies to assimilate themselves in nature, healing, and here we are also going to talk about the atrocities that were committed against them for centuries, and examine a post-colonial relationship between the land and human, and how together they constitute an environment. So you can't take a Native American away from the land and say, this is where you belong. He cannot belong to a place where there is no environment, where there is no nature. It's an extension of himself. So a little bit about Linda Hogan. Linda Hogan was born to a father of Chickasaw heritage, which is itself a native tribe, and a mother who was Pennsylvania Dutch. Although she was raised in Oklahoma, Colorado, and Germany, she always felt she belonged to her hometown, Oklahoma. Therefore, Hogan's concerns center on indigenous people and the environmental issues that often determine their survival. In an interview, Hogan explains, I write about what our Native American difficulties are. I write about political situations that are going awry, like the James Bay Hydro-Quebec project. Part of the reason Hogan's work is purposefully political is because she wants to forge a connection between the people and the environment. And she says, we are connected to everything. So we have to be careful about everything that we do and what affects our future. What happens to the land, what we do to the land affects us. And this is absolutely true, and we all know that. Now, Hogan seeks to restore violently shattered bonds through a process of activism for the land, water, and the natives of boundary waters. Many critics recognize how Hogan incorporates the reader into this activism by reframing these relationships between the humans and the natural world, and how through a process of rejecting the maps of colonization, she wants to create world stories, create an alternative vision. She wants one where materialism can be rejected and environmental racism prominent in the modern, postmodern era can be rejected. Now here in the novel, we talk about a girl called Angel, who's a teenage girl who's returning home after she has been living in one foster home, one after another, and when she comes back to her home, she's shattered by abuse. But when she returns to her family, back home in her native land, she is able to connect to her ancestors and also realizes that there is an inherent connectedness to the natural world, especially water. Angel journeys to the land of the Fat Eaters, a fictional tribe whose land and way of life are threatened by an impending dam project. That's also a fictional corporation called BBCO. Hogan's story actually derives from a real hydroelectric project called the Bay Hydro-Quebec project, which was threatening the life and the waters and the animals of the Native Americans. Angel begins developing a strong relationship with her great-great-grandmother, Dora Rouge, who teaches Angel the healing power of plants and the connection humans have with their animal kin. Angel starts to feel this reconnection at an instinctive level. She says, we would breed together the way wolves do. Husk, who is Angel's companion, tells Angel how he has broken the covenant between animals and men because he has started to trap animals for profit, and since he has been regretting breaking this very sacred vow. He explains to Angel that the covenant promised that they would be caring for one another. It was an agreement much like the one between land and water. But this pact very sorrily had been broken, forced by colonialism and also hunger and need. When Angel goes to live with Bush on Fur Island and she sees Bush in a natural surrounding, she thinks she has gone to her old ways. The map in herself. She realizes Bush acutely recognizes the savagery of civilization and works diligently to protect her home. We find an environmental concern at the heart of Hogan's text. And she offers an approach that combines cultural studies and eco-criticism. With this approach, Hogan participates in a blurring of the border between nature and culture. As Christiva Greevy-Wolof adds, she says, Hogan complicates the dichotomy of ecological Indian versus the spiritually corrupt white man. She explains, on such a pre-linguistic, sensuous, empathetic level, the boundary between species as well as between living and non-living entities have become blurred, making communication all the more possible between human beings and the land. An eco-feminist reading of Solar Storm demonstrates how Hogan's characters are painfully aware of the interconnectedness between the domination of the Native American culture and the exploitation of the non-human biosphere. While Angel learns to live her own personal relationship with the natural world, she also learns that in order to restore peace within herself, within her family, and within the biosphere, she must restore to the connection, the interconnectedness between human and non-human nature. Through her dreams, Angel interprets this connection.
Sorry to disturb. You have 3 minutes more.
Yes, ma'am. Maybe dreams are Earth's vision, I thought, Earth's expression that pass through us. While on the journey, while on the journey, Angel and her grandmother realized that there is no return to life as they knew it, because everything has changed and they have gone too far back. So Angel's story, but nevertheless, is a continuation of a tale of encouragement, of self-worth, where she creates a new identity, and especially when she begins to heal herself naturally. The magic lies in respect for rights of nature. The dominant mainstream attitude towards indigenous knowledge is indicative of a colonial attitude towards indigenous people, their belief, environment, their political rights, sovereignty, and their individual cultures. In representing and insisting on the validity of alternative indigenous viewpoints, American Indian writers can be seen to take part in a form of decolonization, insisting on sovereignty and the need to acknowledge the difference of culture and ways of life. The First Nation writer and activist, Lenian Simpson, says that there has to be a recognition of intellectual property, sovereignty, and environmental degradation if we want to restore the indigenous people back to their sustained way of life. The native survival in the face of internal colonialism and the revitalization of nature, native traditions attest to the truth of Edward Said's repeated theme that there is always something beyond the reach of dominating systems, no matter how totally they saturate society, and that it is this part of the oppressed that the oppressor cannot touch that makes change possible. In every situation, no matter how dominated it is, there's always an alternative. The triumphant, resilient spirit of the Native Americans has helped them sustain themselves in the face of adverse circumstances, and it is this triumph, not merely survival, that Hogan has been able to portray in a meaningful tale of a bond between man and nature. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for such presentation. And now we have some viewers in YouTube too. So if the viewers from YouTube have any questions, please write in the chat box. We will pass the questions to the paper presenter. And apart from that, the participants of Google Meet can also ask questions directly, or even, and finally I ask ma'am, if you have any questions, then feel free to ask us.
Yeah, I was interested because one of my very good friends from Pakistan, Dr. Shahina Ayub Bhatti, was doing, her studies are related to Native American, cultures. And I don't know whether you may have heard of her. She was in Arizona. She was, I think, I think she was Fulbright like 3 or 4 times over. So, were you there in the States doing, research on this?
No, ma'am. No.
Okay.
So my research is, through the net and through books I read.
Okay. Right. Because she was there, and she like all 3 or 4 times she went on a Fulbright. I think she worked on this Native American cultures, and she's a very good scholar. And if you like to get connected, then she would actually help you out to do more work on Native Americans. She's working at Fatima Jinnah University, Women's University.
May I know her good name?
She's Dr. Shahina Ayub Bhatti, and she's the director, Women's Studies, Fatima Jinnah Women's University.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
And please search on her on Google, and she'll be able to give you more input on that. I was interested because since I've been listening to her and all that, so I thought whether you went to the states, and because I myself was there, and we went to this the Oklahoma, and they had a lot of Native American museums, and we had a lot of interactions also part of the Fulbright program. So you might benefit
Oh,
a lot
I
from
would.
yeah. So you can write to her and ask for how to kind of get a Fulbright scholarship to go there and work on that, and it would be more illuminating, I'm sure, if you have the first-hand experience there.
That's a. Thank you for your suggestion. I shall look up.
Yeah, if you send me a mail,
Yes, ma'am.
so then I can forward it to her, or I can write to her and give her mail to you. If you send me your contact
Yes,
details.
ma'am.
Yes,
I would definitely.
yes,
Thank you so
yes.
much.
No problem. Yes, Professor Bhaskar, that's it from my side.
Yes, ma'am.
And
And I think there's no question in YouTube as well. With the presentation, we should end the technical session, first technical session, right now.
yeah,
Thank
okay.
you so much. Thank you.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't, and my audience didn't have any time for question and answer. Why was it because of the time factor? Oh, I think I took the whole 1 hour for.
No, 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 ma'am. It's okay. It's okay, ma'am. It's okay.
Now
Okay.
it's long forgot. Never mind. Never mind.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, then we are just closing this session, and we will be back at 4:30, and we have four paper presenter in that session.
Okay.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to
Thank you.
everyone. Okay.